The Legal Cheat podcast is sponsored by Simpson Thatcher, home of the private equity training contract. A very warm welcome back to the Legal Cheek podcast. My name's Tom. I'm the editor of Legal Cheek, and I'm joined on the call with one of our reporters and editors, Ryan. A very good morning to you, Ryan.
Hi Tom, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thanks. The heat has finally subdued, so it's very comfortable here, which is a relief. So what we're going to talk about today, well, the title of this podcast, as you can see, is From Lawyer to Plasterer. Why do so many quit law? Quite an intriguing title. We're going to dive into it a little bit more, but really the podcast today is focusing a little bit on, well, to start with some of the alternative careers that lawyers have gone on to do, some of the more interesting ones that Legal Cheek has covered as headlines, but also just exploring a little bit about why lawyers decide to quit the legal profession, something that they presumably work very hard to get into, have decided for whatever reason it's not for them and have seeked pastures new, and actually looking at why they do succeed in alternative careers and exploring some of the key points around that. But the hook of this podcast was quite an intriguing article, which links to the headline in this podcast, this courtesy of the Times. And it's kind of a look at a lawyer, and the headline is, I left my job as a lawyer to become a lime plasterer. I think this dropped over the weekend, and I had a quick read of it. Very interesting. Not the first time that I've come across a lawyer quitting to do something unusual. Certainly the first time I've heard of a lawyer quitting to become a lime plasterer. But Ryan, you've read the article. For those of you, those of the people that are tuned in listening to this that might not have read the article, could you just give us a little précis of what's going on here?
Yeah, so Richard Wetherell, he was a director in a personal injury team at a Birmingham-based law firm, and him and his wife had spent several many years trying to look for someone who could do traditional lime plastering for the historic house. And I had to Google what lime plastering was. Apparently, it's some specific specialist heritage building technique that has made a resurgence over the past couple of years. But there's less than 400 like competent lime plasterers in the UK, so there's a lot of demand for it, but not a lot of people who can provide the services. And after a couple of years of looking for a tradesperson and a couple of people letting him down, a couple of people not turning up, he thought, I'm going to learn how to do this myself. So went on YouTube, read a few books, and then he completed a professional lime plastering course. And then he did the lime plastering in his house. I believe some other plasterers told him how well the work was, or how good the work was. And then in comes his career change. So, as I say, he was a legal director at an international firm in Birmingham in the personal injury team. But now he's left his legal career and he became a full-time line plasterer. And the demand for his work is so high that he's got jobs booked in until November now. His wife, Hilary, she's also a personal injury lawyer, but she's a partner at a different Birmingham-based law firm. And I just think it's interesting to see kind of like it's a story that grabs people's attention because, as you say, he's clearly worked very hard for this highly successful career in law. He's got all the way up to director at a big law firm. He would have been a very high earner, and he spent years obviously dedicated to kind of the legal profession. So it kind of just makes you think and reflect upon what motivated this decision for him to leave law, but also what kind of success and fulfillment looks like to everyone. Like it's obviously such a personal and unique thing to every individual. But just on that topic, Tom, you've mentioned there that we've reported on lots of people who left for something completely different, oftentimes something more creative or more hands-on or personally fulfilling, like the arts, restaurants, or different trades. Do you want to cover some of the people we've reported on our legal sheet?
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. Yeah, and I found that story quite wholesome as well. He's found his passion in line plastering, which is great. So good on Richard. Yeah, so I dived through the Legal Cheek archives to find some of the stories we regularly cover about lawyers quitting to pursue other roles. Obviously, for Legal Cheek, we tend to focus on the slightly more unusual roles. If they've kind of just gone into like consultancy or accountancy, that's not going to necessarily grab the headlines. But the first one that jumped out to me was a former Taylor Wessing lawyer. This was more recently, called Sahar. Quite an interesting one. She ended up in Forbes magazine actually, because she's now developed quite a successful handbag company. The kind of the niche, or the kind of the selling point for her handbags being that they're cruelty free, eco-friendly and not made of real leather, so they're vegan leather handbags. Um, that story did really well because our audience is always like they really kind of get engaged with these lawyers that, like I say, have worked incredibly hard to get to where they are and have decided it's not for them for whatever reason, and they've moved into alternative careers. But this woman or this story that we were talking about, Sahar, she kind of documents how the fact that she kind of dropped to sort of part time to doing legal consultancy work, and it was actually her legal work that allowed her to save up to actually launch this business. So it won't come as a surprise that corporate lawyers, on the whole, are very well paid. She's been quite diligent with her savings, and this allowed her to kind of set up the initial start costs, including designs, sampling, marketing shoots, websites, which enabled her to kind of put together her first order. And it seems like her success story snowballed from there. And now she runs a very successful bag company. And it seems, reading kind of her interview that we picked up from Forbes magazine, it seems like she had an underlying passion for kind of design and fashion and bagware, if that's even is that a thing? But she seemed to have that always undesiring passion, and you find that quite a lot. And we'll come on to the reasons why some lawyers decide to leave, but some lawyers do have passions pre-law, believe it or not, and it's sometimes they're sort of shelved because law is seen as possibly the safe route. It's certainly in terms of when the economy is kind of not in great shape, which arguably it is at the minute. People kind of are attracted to safe careers, and kind of setting up a business on your own as an entrepreneur wouldn't be considered a particularly recession-proof career. So it's unsurprising that she kind of went into law to kind of build up this nest egg of money to then, fortunately, a great story in that she's managed to kind of create a very successful business out of it. Another couple of examples that jumped out, I'm going back quite a few years now. There was one involving a magic circle lawyer at Linklaters, a woman called Harpreet. And there was also a girl called Olivia who had secured a pupillage and had worked at Five Paper Buildings, which is quite a prominent chambers in London. And obviously, Linklaters goes without saying, one of the top firms in the city and a member of the Magic Circle. But both of them decided to ditch their careers in law to actually pursue baking. Which is quite an interesting turn. Again, I think reading both interviews, it's quite interesting how they seem to both had an underlying passion for this. They've gone into law. They've not stayed in it particularly long. They were both, from what I understand, pretty junior at the time when they decided to pivot. And Harpreet set up a company called Crumbs Couture. Great name. I think it's actually changed or rebranded since we wrote this article through my Google searches. And Olivia set up kind of like a freelance sort of food writing, cookery, cordon bleu kind of setup where she, helps people learn how to cook and just informs people. And again, it seems like both have decided to follow their passion, and particularly with Harpreet, she was quite open. Legal Cheat spoke to both of them in an exclusive interview, and she kind of talks quite candidly about how working in law left her feel quite isolated. She by her own admission struggled a little bit with depression, despite being surrounded by colleagues. She felt very very lonely, and also just kind of the intense hours that obviously come with working at a top Magic Circle firm or any kind of city firm nowadays. She just felt that she wanted to get a little bit more out of life, and decided to follow her passion and go into baking. And it was a sort of similar story to a certain extent with Olivia. Just she felt that she'd secured pupillage, she was training, now a barrister, and kind of sort of conceded that this career perhaps isn't for her. And I know we're going to go into some of the reasons why lawyers decide to kind of leave law, but and this was something we haven't discussed before, Ryan, but it's just that you're having to make a decision about your legal career very, very early on, and even earlier on now with the solicitor apprenticeship route. So there's some people that are kind of 16 and 17 thinking they're going into corporate law firms and making decisions at that age, that they want to be corporate lawyers or barristers. Now, taking myself back more years than I care to admit, to when I was 16 or 17. The thought of being a lawyer had not even crossed my mind. I think I was still gearing for maybe a fireman or maybe an astronaut. I had high aspirations. But I mean, just very quickly, Ryan, before I know we're going to digress slightly, but at what stage did you kind of realize that law was for you?
Well, I did make a LinkedIn post on it, so I was about 10, so I can't detract from that. I was watching Suits when I was younger, and I knew I wanted to get into corporate law, so that it's always been kind of on the cards for me. But I know that's not the case for most people. Quite a lot of my friends went to do kind of what they were passionate about at uni. Usually, quite a lot of historians to feed into the trope, and then they finished the history degree and decided I want to become a lawyer now. Um, so I think quite a lot of people don't make the decision until later in life. I just knew from quite a young age.
No, well, that's good. Yeah, some people are like that. 10 watching Suits. Yeah, that I guess that would make any wide-eyed 10-year-old want to become a corporate lawyer. And we've got our final story that I picked out. We had quite a few, and you can kind of find all of these on Legal Cheat. But the one that really always makes me smile and was one of Legal Cheat's most popular stories of the year back in 2018 when I wrote this. So that makes me feel incredibly old. But it was a junior solicitor from New Zealand who ditched law to become a clown. That was the headline, and I mean the headline is not 100% reflective of the story. You've got to drill into a bit more of the detail. But Phoebe, her name was working as a solicitor in New Zealand, like I say, and she decided it wasn't for her, and she sort of pivoted towards doing some theatre work and acting work. And as part of this acting work, one of her roles was dressing up as a clown. And it was a really heartwarming story. She was helping people who would be poorly in hospital, cheer up children as well as other kind of roles. And weirdly, she actually said clowning pursuits, they aren't overly financially stable, which probably won't come as a surprise to anyone. So again, it just shows that kind of shift, and that was reflected in some of the other stories that I've mentioned already. Lawyers naturally, by their own probably admission, are quite risk averse, going to kind of whether it's an entrepreneurial thing like launching your own bag company or bakery company or becoming a clown. One of the things that can keep them from pursuing their passions or dreams or quitting law is the relative financial stability that comes with a career in law, and it's considered quite a safe bet. And once you're in, it can sometimes be quite difficult to leave, very much due to that. So, I mean, we've touched upon it already, but I'm going to dive into some of the reasons why lawyers may quit. I'm going to take the first couple round. I think then you've got a few, but the ones that jumped out to me, and again, we've just touched upon it, it's just not for them. Some people, you can spend 3 years at law school, and this is for our UK listeners. You spend 3 years at law school, then you kind of go through the SQE, which potentially could be another year and a half of incredible study, intense study. And then you've got 2 years of, if you go the solicitor route here in the UK, the training contract. So, that's 5, 6, 7 years of work before you're technically qualified. A lot of people after those 7 years think, well, do you know what, this isn't what I envisaged. And they make the difficult decision. And we do see, on qualification or 2, 3 PQE, very junior, they're deciding, do you know what, the law's not for me. I've tried it and I don't feel like it was the right fit, whether it's the work, the culture, or the lifestyle. And I can sort of resonate that with that slightly, in that, I did a law conversion and then did the bar course, and it was sort of kind of three-quarters of the way through the bar course that I realized I probably didn't want to be a barrister. I really enjoyed the law, but I thought, where can I find a fit where I'm still sort of involved in the law, but I'm not necessarily practicing it. And legal journalism was sort of the outlet, or the path that I ended up going down. So I think the vast majority of the people that I've mentioned in these articles will probably say that it wasn't for them. That would be one of the factors, at least at play. The second one, and again, this probably won't come as much of a surprise to those of you tuned in, is the hours culture. Um, whether it's constantly tracking your kind of work in 6-minute increments, which can obviously naturally lead to overworking, which ties into kind of at some firms quite high billing targets. But we obviously, Legal Cheat conducts research each year based on our annual training and junior lawyer survey, which shows the kind of the working hours or the average working hours at leading top city law firms. And you can see that, while you are being paid incredibly well at these firms, you're spending a lot of time at your desk, sometimes over 12 hours. And then there's kind of comments that we get from lawyers who say, yeah, even when I'm away from my desk for those few hours each day, I'm still sort of on the clock. I have to have kind of access to my email, be it on my phone or my laptop at home. I'm always on dealing with client issues. And obviously that can take its toll both on the mental health of lawyers, the well-being, but also lawyers just look at it and think, do you know what, there's potentially more to life than this. And I mean, by contrast, there's lots of lawyers who thrive in that environment and absolutely love it and work their way up to kind of partner and earn incredible sums of money. But for the handful of lawyers in that particular cohort, for example, there will be a few in there that think, do you know what, this just isn't for me. I'm going to find a career that's potentially a bit more work life friendly. But Ryan, you've been looking at potentially some other reasons why lawyers quit. What did you come up with?
Yeah, just before I move on, I just wanted to touch on what you said about hours there and just like work-life balance in general. I think it does vary a lot, obviously, from firm to firm and practice to practice. Like if you're at a US firm, you're going to be having really high billable hours targets and you'll be doing a lot of late nights and there's a much greater risk of burnout there. And I imagine also turnover of associates from US firms. I haven't looked into it, but I imagine just with kind of the hours you are forced to work there, people will get a lot more stressed out, a lot more burnt out more easily and leave for something else. And then in mid-market kind of UK firms, you'll have a lot lower billable hours targets and you might have freer evenings and weekends and it's a lot more sustainable a lifestyle. And also when you look at the kind of NQ and beyond salaries of these mid-market UK firms, they're still incredibly generous, like in comparison to the rest of the UK salaries. Like it's just that law is a really high earning profession. So you see some of these headline rates, I guess, of the US firms, and it kind of grabs your attention of like 180K qualified salary. And you're instantly attracted to it. But even if you look at some of the firms in the regions that are paying 70 to 80K, that's still a lot of money to live a good life, essentially. It also differs a lot between whether you're in private practice or whether you're in-house. If you're in-house, you'll probably finish the work day along with everyone else at that job. If you're in private practice, then you might be there very late into the night, coordinating across different time zones and working with lawyers across jurisdictions. So you expect to be there a lot later. And also the rise of remote working, like you say, Tom, is that sometimes there is an expectation that you're always on and you can't log off. And we've heard from a lot of uh, trainee and juniors at US firms that they might be expected to take a laptop on holiday with them or a work phone on holiday with them, and they can't ever fully tune out of their emails if they want to. So yeah, it's just difficult to switch off and it can mean just less time for yourself, missing social occasions and like family events and things like that. And after a while, it will just start to kind of build up like an emotional toll. And on that topic, as we say, with like the emotional toll of working in law, I guess there is a constant pressure to perform, whether it is through hitting billable targets so you can get a bonus, or whether that's just for a good kind of performance review from your boss. There's also a lot of competition between you and the people you work with for maybe like an NQ position. Sometimes firms post like retention rates of about 70%, and there's not always an NQ position open for everyone who's there. So you got to you got to make sure you're in your top performance at all times. Same with as you work your way up the kind of food chain to like partnership. Not everyone's going to be promoted to partner, so you just kind of want to do your best to stand out, and you constantly compete with others. And the trade-off is that you get a huge salary when you kind of in your early 20s if you're a kind of junior or a trainee lawyer, but there's an enormous amount of responsibility and kind of sacrifice in return. Especially when you're so young as well. Like some people come fresh out of uni onto a training contract and I think they're 21. I'm 24 and haven't started mine yet, but 21-year-old me probably wouldn't want to handle all the responsibility that some of these people do at US firms, and they just got a lot on their plate all at once. Um, Another thing is just kind of how success is defined in a law firm. So it'll be defined by kind of billable hours, the clients you win over, the revenue you generate. There's a lot of room for people who kind of define success or fulfillment differently, and it can leave people feeling, as I say, unfulfilled or lacking a sense of purpose, perhaps. Um, Another thing as well is that I think we touched upon this earlier as well, that law is a very kind of well-paying job. Um, and for some, law isn't always part of it's not always the end goal. Perhaps it's just earn well whilst you're young, and then retire early and pursue your other passions or hobbies or creative pursuits, whatever it may be. In fact, we hear from quite a lot of people who have left law, they've only been able to do that because they've saved up all this money while they've been young, invested it, and then pursue the other interest they've got with financial security. And then just on a bit of a different note, and this is touching upon what was on about before with examples of people who left the law and where they've gone, just on kind of like the rise of alternative legal careers. So we've seen quite a lot of people move over to law tech now. So like legal AI companies have been on a bit of a hiring spree recently, especially like Harvey and Legora. And that's just came at the same time as these had these like booming valuations. I mean, over the past few years, they've gone from being worth several hundred million to now several billion. Um, they often offer quite a lot of perks, better work-life balance, greater flexibility, and the chance to stay connected to law without actually practicing and having all these other pressures put on you. And there's also been a rise of like law fluencers. So we've seen like Aki does law. He left, I think it was HSFK recently to focus just on legal content. Edin Sabaipo, he started Little Law and he was at CMS, I believe. Henry Nelson Case, I think he was at Pinsent Masons and now he's a full-time legal content creator and does like TEDx speeches. And then Vera Maisel and Ellie Stephanie, they were interesting ones because they both moved into law tech, but they also maintain quite a strong social media presence as well. So they're still doing all the content creation side. So there's a lot of reasons why people leave. It might, as you said, Tom, it might just not be for them. It is a very high paying career and that is attractive for that reason. But after a while, it can get a bit draining, I guess, or the emotional toll can wear on you. But on the flip side, I just wanted to cover why people might stay as well even if they are burnt out. And one thing you hear about a lot in the papers is kind of like lifestyle creep. So lawyers will become accustomed to high salaries, and it's the same with any high salary job, and their lifestyle will adapt to the new income level, whether that's through buying an expensive house and taking a mortgage out on it, or buying or financing new cars, going on fancy holidays, going to fancy restaurants, shopping at new places you wouldn't have before. Or over time, it becomes kind of more difficult to walk away from that lifestyle you're now accustomed to. And if you do it, it kind of feels like you're taking a step back in your career or like your personal life, and you've got these new social circles, whatever it may be. So even if someone wants to leave, they might feel like they're financially locked in because of the kind of the life they built around the salary they've been getting. So taking a step back from that or dropping lower to a lesser salary is kind of a difficult move to make, I guess. But Tom, do you have any more reasons you want to cover, or have I covered everything there why people might leave?
Yeah, I think you've basically covered it. I did have a maybe one final point, but there's a bit of overlap there. But it was kind of just looking at the entrepreneurial spirit of
Mm,
some lawyers, and the trend of lawyers going on to not necessarily work for other large corporations, but actually going it alone and setting up their own businesses. And it seems like there's an element of freedom to that, having kind of worked in a structure. Law firms by their design, or the vast majority of law firms by their design, are hierarchical.
mm,
You're always reporting to somebody else till you make it up to the kind of echelons of senior partner. And I think maybe a lot of lawyers break away from that model and go it alone and launch their own business because there's a real sense of freedom about that, and being your own boss and not having to report to anyone else. So it's quite, I imagine it's quite liberating. But on
mm,
the flip side, as well, as you mentioned about the kind of the tying of the salary and being accustomed to a certain lifestyle, it's also incredibly brave. So I don't want to kind of people leaving this podcast thinking, oh, well, they quit law because they couldn't hack the challenges, because that's certainly not the case. If anything, the challenges are equally difficult in launching your own business. They're just a different set of challenges, and it doesn't come with the sort of the safety net of a monthly salary, a very big monthly salary at some firms that corporate law has. So I always respect it when I see. That's why I kind of my heart warmed up when I saw that this corporate lawyer had sorry, not corporate lawyer, personal injury lawyer, had quit to become a line plasterer. Albeit it seems like he obviously his wife presumably is still doing financially very well. And I think the Times included a photo of his house they're not
He
doing
did
too
look
bad.
very nice. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they've earned plenty of money. So I don't think he's quite on the breadline while he's line plastering. I think he's living a very comfortable life. So we've obviously looked at some of the reasons why lawyers quit, but maybe why they succeed after leaving. And I know a lot of people will say, well, a lot of lawyers leave and they don't succeed, but it's very difficult to pick up on those stories because they tend to not make it into the press. But let's keep it positive and why they succeed. And I just thought I'd kick things off with a very obvious point. It's because they're, on the whole, very bright individuals. If you've managed to, and I keep falling on to the default of corporate law, so forgive me, but if you've managed to secure a training contract and have worked at a corporate law firm, it's probably a safe assumption that you're relatively bright. I know there'll probably be lots of people watching this on YouTube screaming at their screen saying, I know lots of lawyers and a lot of them are idiots. And that goes without saying in any profession, but the vast majority will be kind of bright, switched on people. So to kind of take your kind of skill set and your kind of your brightness to another industry, whether it's launching a business or becoming a clown in the most extreme example that we have today, you're probably going to do well. There's no reason why. Obviously, I think there's some stats about if you're setting up a business, how many of them fail within the first 12 months. But we've reported on lots of stories of lawyers carving out successful businesses. Some lawyers are actually behind some of these incredible AI companies that have been launched that are now worth staggering sums of money. So they're bright people. So it probably doesn't come as a surprise that when they turn their hand to something else, they'll succeed, whatever that might be. Um, Business skills and business acumen, this is something that's sort of not drummed into law students, but certainly they're told to have a keen awareness of. But you're depending on which area of law you go into, but again, let's kind of fall on corporate law as the kind of the leading example. You're going to have some business acumen. You're going to have knowledge about how your clients' businesses function, how they work. That also ties into the dreaded phrase commercial awareness. And what's happening in the markets, et cetera, et cetera. You're getting exposed to kind of negotiation, managing clients, handling contracts, translating into running and advising businesses. These are all vital skills that you'll have developed through your training contract and potentially your years in law that you can transpose across into another profession. So, we hear about people coming into law late from other professions and exceeding, very well. And some law firms are actively seeking people that are looking to kind of qualify as lawyers from other industries because they know those skills that have been honed and developed in those other businesses are incredibly important. So kind of flipping that on its head and having the lawyers go across to those businesses and potentially working whether startups, launching AI companies or handbag companies or bakery companies or whatever it might be. Again, it probably comes as no surprise that a lot of lawyers succeed when they do that because again, that tied with them being on the whole very bright people, it's a winning combination when it comes to working in another business. So there was a couple of things that jumped out to me, Ryan. Was there anything else that you thought why lawyers might succeed in other roles?
Yeah, I mean, one of them is that they're very comfortable under pressure. I mean, they have to make important decisions as regard kind of on tight deadlines or with very high stakes attached to them. Sometimes they might not have all the information there. And being able to kind of act under pressure, make those decisions quickly, thoughtfully, it's a skill entrepreneurs and business leaders will need every single day. And then another aspect of it is that lawyers will build up a very large professional network throughout their careers. You'll meet people from all sorts of backgrounds. You never know which relationships will be valuable later down the line. You might build relationships with kind of business owners, executives, investors, accountants, bankers, whatever it may be. And those contacts can later become kind of your customers or your advisors, investors, business partners, just a friend to lend an ear. And plus, you get all these sorts of networking opportunities when you're working in like a big law firm if you're attending kind of seminars or conferences or forums on AI or investment or fintech, whatever it may be, you can meet all sorts of interesting people in these rooms who can help you out later down the line. Another one would definitely be work ethic and resilience. I mean, as you say, I think lawyers are quite bright people for the most part. They've worked very hard throughout their kind of law degrees, then law school, and then actually securing a training contract in the end. It's a very kind of long slog to qualify. But lawyers are also no strangers to kind of burning the proverbial midnight oil. They'll be used to. I apologize as well for referring mainly to corporate law here. There is obviously other kind of practices in law as well. You can go into private client, family law, employment law, all sorts of different things, public law. But in this kind of context, you'll see a lot of corporate lawyers working very, very long hours, working past midnight and on weekends. So they'll be used to kind of running these long transactions, working to really tight deadlines, turning work around on really tight turnaround times, and also balancing kind of all the other pressures and responsibilities they might have during kind of SQE and law school exam season. Um, and I think that kind of discipline and resilience and work ethic can be easily redirected into kind of a new business or a new career. And you touched upon this one earlier for a second, Tom, but kind of commercial awareness as well, particularly true of commercial lawyers. If you're advising businesses and entrepreneurs, you're expected to be kind of immersed in all in markets, industry trends, business news. You got to be up to date on it at all times. So you kind of develop that strong commercial instinct, and you can apply that knowledge to your own ventures. Um, and then just on like a final point as well would just be kind of problem solving skills. I mean, legal training teaches you to spot issues quickly, to be able to analyze problems from multiple angles, think logically and strategically. And that's a skill hugely transferable in business and leadership. As well as that, the further you go up in your career as a lawyer as well, you get more used to delegation and dealing with people like below you. So you might be working with paralegals who you delegate work to, with trainees if you hire up than them, for example. And just those delegation skills can really help in a leadership role and kind of managing other people. Tom, do you have anything else to add in terms of kind of the toolkit lawyers come out of law with? Or you're on mute, Tom.
God, you'd think I'd get the hang of it by now. No, I think that's pretty comprehensive in terms of what we've covered there. But I mean, if you're listening, wherever you're listening, whether it's Spotify, I know a lot of people are listening to us on YouTube at the moment. Do let us know in the comments what you think some of the other kind of attributes that former lawyers bring to the table when it comes to working in other industries, or if you're a lawyer who is quit and is doing something uh, incredibly unusual as a second career, do again get in touch with Legal Cheek or let us know in the comments. We might be able to pick it up as a short news story. But yeah, so that's covered that. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Legal Cheek podcast. Ryan, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon, or this morning, should I say. And just a reminder that the Legal Cheek podcast is sponsored by Simpson Thatcher, home of the private equity training contract.